Hello and welcome in. I am Greg Smith, Senior Recruiting Analyst here at Inside Nebraska, and welcome into a special edition of our Coach Search Hot Topics. I am joined by National Analyst Clint Cosgrove here at Rivals. Clint, first things first, man, how are you?
I am great. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. It's the busy time now that is
Oh
figured to
gosh.
not slow down until the early signing period is over. Maybe I think this is like our
Yeah,
ramp up,
hopefully. Yeah.
and to
I'm
that like
exhausted already, so
yeah, and like you guys do, well, here you can see it here. I've got the giant coffee. Right, we're preemptively exhausted. Now, as you guys know, we here on this YouTube channel, we've been doing kind of hot topics around Nebraska's coaching search, and really focused on the football side of things. But obviously, we also cover recruiting quite well too. So I wanted to bring Clint in to kind of talk about kind of this big topic of what Nebraska needs in a future coach that could be hired, within a week here, most likely from a recruiting perspective. Like, what are the things that Nebraska needs to be looking for on the recruiting trail, kind of from the national perspective? So I want to start here, Clint, because this comes up quite a bit with kind of fans on our insiders board. Like, does it matter? Does Nebraska's new coach need to have specific areas of the country that he's good in? And if so, what do those need to be?
yeah, I mean, there's a number of ways to look at this. I think you definitely have to identify a footprint and you have to recruit accordingly. If you're just kind of spotting here and there, you at least have to make your presence felt in whatever areas those are. Now, there's some obvious areas, Kansas City, maybe St. Louis, Chicago, this kind of regional type thing where in Illinois there's a lot of good players,
A lot.
and in the past they've been up for grabs. So I feel that Nebraska could do a much better job in Illinois, and they've really started ramping that up since Mickey's been in charge. I think that is a formula, a winning formula that they can continue to use. Same thing with Kansas City. You got Dawson this class, St. Louis. So the low hanging fruit for sure. But at the same time, you're going to have to go out, and if you want to build Nebraska back to what it has been in the past, you're going to have to win some battles. And you're going to have to go after some big time dudes, just like they have with, guys like Amarion Miller right now. And so that's where your staff makeup, I think, really comes into it. So you have your footprint, but then you also hire a staff, assemble a staff accordingly that can allow you to go and get big wins elsewhere. And I think really that is the blueprint moving forward. Whatever your footprint is, whatever mileage it is, and then you hire, accordingly to get into these other areas that are going to be crucial for your success moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree, and you're spot on about to me about kind of Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago. I think are three spots that Nebraska could just stand to do like much better in, and it has been more of a. And it sounds so weird when I say this out loud, and when you say it to people, they're like, "I can't believe this." That it really had those areas have been kind of spot recruited by
Yep.
Nebraska in the last a handful of years, more than a handful of years, which is kind of it's odd to me, just on the big picture level, is that those are kids that are being recruited by a lot of schools around the country. So you go in like they're like solid kids that are like you mentioned in Chicago, especially Illinois, where there's just a lot of talent that is up for grabs, particularly in that state. Now I'm from that state, so I understand this even more. Is that kids don't grow up wanting to go to U of I or Northwestern? Like it's not
Yep.
really a thing, and so you're more likely to run into people that want to go to Notre Dame or Michigan, but it's not always that those kids are at the level of Notre Dame or Michigan, right? And so
Exactly.
you end up in this weird thing where, like you said, kids are really up for grabs. And so Nebraska going into that state and really focusing in on Kansas City, which has continued to develop. They're still not at the level of St. Louis when it comes to depth of
No,
talent, but they are on the rise. Like it is definitely, you
there's
can
elite
see,
talent.
yeah, there's elite talent there. And what you're starting to also see is that there's a lot more of the like specialized training and stuff going on in Kansas City now
Yep.
too, which is going to also continue to help rise the talent there as well. And my last point about that kind of footprint is that's where the teams that you play recruit. And I'm just
Yeah.
such a big believer in you've got to eventually win recruiting battles against the teams that you play so that not only are you getting players that are comparable, right? You're also
Yep.
taking players away from them that can then hurt their program in the long run when you
Yeah.
go and play them. And I just feel like that hasn't happened enough.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when Nebraska was a powerhouse, granted there were more scholarships, they would literally take the guys they wanted, and then they'd take the guys they didn't want to play against as well.
Right.
And I'm sure that those guys ended up being, pretty good players in their own
Right.
right. Now, you can't really do that today with scholarship limits, but at the same time, like you said, you want to win those battles. And you can't be afraid to go up against the best for the best players.
Right.
But at the same time, you got to do a great job evaluating, getting in on kids early, and really making an impression. And, there's a little buzz about Nebraska in the Midwest because kids are getting offers. Offers are going out, and they're going out to good players. And then the other thing that I didn't touch on is you obviously want to build that fence around the state. You do not want to lose a Power 5 caliber kid from in-state. And Nebraska football is getting better. I was up at that game when Lincoln East played Gretna. There was dudes on the field. So I mean, there's good football in state. You want to lock that down. Choose the areas you're going to spot for elite talent. Go after the elite talent in St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago, and then hire a staff that has strong connections that can get you into areas that otherwise you cannot. Not just anybody can go into St. Louis and recruit the
right. You need someone that's a guy to go do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing with New Orleans. You can't just go down there and steal top talent unless they trust you, unless you are, you have been recruiting the area and you're pretty plugged in. So that's important as far as your staff makeup goes too. But just being very calculated, taking a look at your own roster and recruiting accordingly.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the in-state talent, because that kind of leads perfectly to another big topic that I wanted to hit before we get out of here, which is kind of recruiting versus development, right? And they kind of go hand in hand, and it's been a really big topic around here, especially towards the end of the Frost era, and as you've watched Nebraska football play throughout this season. And the reason I think this ties into in-state and what you're talking about not letting Power 5 guys get out of the state is that, yes, that's 100% true. You also need to do a better job of evaluating and then developing those guys that are fringe guys within the state, because you're more likely to get those guys, and then, hey, they need to go on the shelf for a couple of years with the new strength and conditioning staff. There'll be a new strength and conditioning staff as well, which I feel like I'm always mentioning in these videos, because I think that is low-key so important. I'm going to find a way to do a whole thing on that. It
is very important.
Yeah, it's like so important. But if you get like, and it's kind of the model, and it's interesting. I know people get sensitive about this, but Iowa and Wisconsin, they do the same thing, right? Where they put up the border around the state, and they get these guys that aren't like highly recruited, and they're not the top end guys of their class, but they end up kind of, developing over a couple of years, and then all of a sudden they've got this depth, especially on the offensive line, where you're just rolling guys in because they've developed them, and you've got to have those developers on the staff. But I guess, what are your thoughts about being able to have that recruiting eye, but also the development and the identification too on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I think they all go hand in hand, and they're one big part of an equation. So I look at the player development twofold. One, it helps in recruiting. If I know that my son is going to go there, or if I'm going to go to a program, I'm going to get the best of everything, whether it be mental, physical, coaching, development. You got to have those things in place. It's more than just going into the weight room and going to practice now. This new world of recruiting, this new world of college football with the opportunities in NIL, you want to find ways to make your program attractive, that I know that I am going to go there. I am going to have success, whether I'm an impact player on the field or not. And I'm going to develop not only as an athlete, not only as a player, but as a person. And so you got to have that infrastructure in place. Strength program, no brainer. Players spend more time with the strength coach probably than any other coach on staff. As far as, mental stuff, how are we preparing the kids mentally? How do we make them have a better chance at overcoming adversity? Are there programs in place to help them secure NIL deals to, profit off of their name, image, and likeness? Are there, community service opportunities? All of these things, when you talk player development, the first thing you think of is, the coaching and the strength program. And those are two of the most key components, but this is all about developing the player fully. If you are developed and well-rounded in every area, your chances for success are much higher. So I think the player development part is huge in terms of not only once the kids are in there, making the most out of them, getting the most out of them, demanding their best, kind of like the military does. Right. They give you no chance. You're going to be the best, or you're not going to be part of the military. And so I think it's twofold. Having the player development piece in place, knowing that a player is going to go somewhere, whether I'm the best athlete in the country or a borderline fringe guy, I'm going to leave way better and I'm going to have an opportunity to reach my max potential because this program is going to offer that to me. I think it's huge. Not only once they're there, but also before they're there as a way to get them in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is something above, like, as we kind of think about Nebraska and where they're going with their recruiting and a new coaching staff and all of that, I think that that would be just so huge if Nebraska could get to the place or back to the place to where, and it's a recruiting selling point that we're going to develop you. And that's where kind of then we haven't even mentioned this of getting to, hey, we've developed you now into an NFL player. That also ends up being a part of it, right? It's another part of that equation.
Oh, yeah.
Where like you just get the benefit of the doubt, and it's not just it's the benefit of the doubt from recruits when they're looking at your school. It's benefit of the doubt from fans. It keeps fans off your back, right? When
Yeah.
like no one's questioning like if a guy, if a 3-star running back that is not highly recruited goes to Wisconsin, their fans are not saying, "Oh man, I can't believe we took this guy." It's, "Oh yeah, they see something in him and they'll develop him and make him into the
Yeah.
next insert running back X that they've had,"
Yep.
right? And so those things help. It all matters. And why I just think it'll be so interesting to see kind of we've talked a lot about the staff makeup for the next coach. Everybody's focused on kind of who that coach will be, the head coach, but that staff makeup is going to be so crucial and critical to get a blend and a balance of guys like a Mickey Joseph that are, known as big time recruiters and also coaches, and then guys that are known for development as well. Like that part of it, I think people have learned is going to be really, really something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's huge. If I'm putting together a staff, I'm looking for guys who are the best at recruiting, the best at coaching, the best at developing. There's no reason that a coach can't be a great recruiter and a great coach. Now, I understand you
Right.
got to have a couple guys who aren't necessarily maybe your coordinators who are going to be the X's and O's guys. They spend their time organizationally. And then, but the rest of the players, a position coach, they better be able to coach up their position. They better be detail and oriented, technique. And I think a lot of that stuff carries over to recruiting as well. The other thing that I wanted to touch on real quickly when it comes to player development is if you do a great job of developing players, you start sending walk-ons to the NFL, and that's how you really build that fence around the state. You got a kid who's grown up wanting to play for Nebraska their entire life. Maybe they only get group of 5 offers. They're willing to pass up that opportunity, knowing that if I go to Nebraska, they will develop me and I will have a chance to go to the NFL in the end. And when you see that start happening, as a big time recruit, you're like, well, if those guys can go there and develop like that,
Right.
imagine what I can do. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why like there's just so many layers to this discussion and why it's such a fascinating thing and why I wanted to have you on. And I definitely appreciate you jumping on for this. And we'll definitely have to do it again because we'll
yeah,
have a whole new can of worms once a coach is named. And then you start to get some assistants come in and kind of think about like where they need to take the finish to this recruiting class. Because, oh, by the way, if we are, finishing up a 2023 recruiting class.
crazy.
And boy, we're now inside of a month until the beginning of the early signing period, which as both of us kind of shake our heads, we're like, I can't believe it's here already. So that's going to do it for us on this video. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can continue getting this digital content directly into your feed. For Clint Cosgrove, I am Greg Smith. We will catch you guys next time.